Today I'll be giving an introduction to ChatGPT and how we can leverage it in our daily lives. Some background on me. My name is Caitie Hilverman. I am a data scientist by training. Spent the last 5 years working in mental health tech, where I worked with a lot of different language models, and also had to sort of weigh in a lot on the ethical use of these models in our product. Before that, so I had a PhD in cognitive psychology, and I studied learning and memory. And so all of this sort of comes together as I join the Spark. It's like the sort of intersection of all of my interests. I wanted to give a disclaimer that, I think this presentation is coming on the heels of a lot of leaders in tech getting together on Tuesday of this week and saying language models like ChatGPT are an existential threat to humanity. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think that the risks that ChatGPT poses to our society or to jobs or to whatever else are valid and real. And I think that's all the more reason that we understand how to use it carefully and what it is. And so we can weigh in sort of from an informed perspective as we use language models like this. I want this to be really informal. So if you have questions, feel free to just come off mute and ask them. Yeah, we can sort of go from there. All right, let's see. All right, an overview of what I'm going to cover here. What is ChatGPT? How does it work? What are some ChatGPT use cases? What are its limitations? What are some ethical considerations? And how do we get started with it? All right, so who better to answer this question than ChatGPT itself? This is a screenshot of me interacting with ChatGPT, asking, what is it, in 3 simple bullets. So it's an AI-powered language model developed by OpenAI. It can understand and generate human-like text responses in real-time conversations, and it is trained on a large amount of diverse text data and can assist users with a wide range of inquiries and tasks. You can have ChatGPT tell you about itself in a lot of different ways by using different prompts. And so then I asked, how would you explain ChatGPT to a 6-year-old? So it's like a smart talking robot that can understand what you say and answer your questions or have a chat with you. It learns to talk by reading lots of books and articles and stories. It can help you find information, tell you stories, or just have a fun conversation with you. So it's very good at modifying the tone and the information level based on the prompt that you give it. And just to illustrate that it can also be fun, what is it as a limerick? In a digital realm, there's a bot, ChatGPT. It's quite a hot shot with language that plays, answering all in its ways, a chatty AI hitting the spot. So very cute. So how does ChatGPT relate to AI? So it leverages AI techniques, including machine learning, specifically deep learning, and natural language processing to understand and generate human-like text responses in a conversational manner. But what does this mean? Just want to get some square on some terminology. So when I say AI, that means artificial intelligence. This is creating smart machines that can perform tasks requiring human-like intelligence. Machine learning is teaching computers to learn from data without explicit programming. So this can be by giving it a bunch of data and having it detect patterns in that data. That is unsupervised learning, or by giving it a data set that's been explicitly labeled. So all data that looks like this is of this category, all data that looks like this is of this category, and it learns to predict what it sees based on those labels. That's called supervised learning. And there's natural language processing, enabling computers to understand, interpret, and generate human language. And then deep learning. This is using neural networks, which are these complex networks that try to mimic the human brain and how neurons interact with each other to learn complex patterns in data. So how these relate to ChatGPT. ChatGPT falls under the broader domain of AI as it aims to create a system that can engage in human-like conversation. It uses machine learning techniques as well. So it learns from a vast amount of text data and uses that knowledge to generate coherent and contextually appropriate responses. NLP, natural language processing, it incorporates these techniques to understand human language and analyzes the input it receives to generate meaningful responses. And then it also uses deep learning, specifically these deep neural networks, to learn intricate patterns in the training data. So the architecture is designed to process and understand human language and all of its complexities.
So Caitie, real quick, so ChatGPT, it's its own kind of proprietary AI, right? There's not like an open source. It's not that it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how would it differ than any of the other like it's gotten all the notorieties or anything that's a competitor at the moment of it?
Yeah, it'll be quite similar, right? So ChatGPT is just the first. It was created by OpenAI, and they're just sort of ahead of the game. But what we'll see now is the generation of language models that are like this by Microsoft and every company, especially as companies begin to ban the use of ChatGPT for their workers. It's not because they don't see the utility, it's because they are concerned about their privacy and are likely building their own internal models.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Cool. All right, so how does it work? Well, to understand how it works, we can think about what it was trained on. So it was trained on diverse text data from all over the internet. That data includes sources like books, articles, websites, and more, basically all text data. And it has a knowledge cutoff. That means it was trained on data available up to a certain point. So that point is September 2021 for ChatGPT 3. This variation in text data helps ChatGPT learn language patterns and contexts across domains. So the more variability that you give it in training data, the more robust its learning is going to be. Like OpenAI has not been forthcoming about what they've trained this on. They've gotten some heat from people who said they trained it on their proprietary data without their consent. They don't have to disclose that. But yeah, so these models are trained on just an incredible amount of data, and that's what allows them to so closely sort of mimic human linguistic behavior. All right, so how is it trained? This is a multi-step process. So first, they collect all of this diverse data from various internet sources like books, articles, websites, and this will help train it on a wide range of language patterns. Then they pre-process that data. So they clean it, filter it, format it to ensure that it's high quality and it gets rid of noise and like irrelevant information. Then it uses this deep learning model called Transformer, which is an advanced architecture that sort of allows the model to understand and generate human-like text responses. And it's given a training objective. So this model is trained with the objective of predicting the next word in a sentence, given the previous word. So this training will help ChatGPT learn the statistical patterns and relationships within text data. And then that training is iterative. So it undergoes multiple training iterations using super powerful computers like GPUs and TPUs, and this will allow it to refine its understanding and improve its performance. And then after that, it gets fine-tuned. So the model goes through a process called fine-tuning where it's trained on a narrower data set that has like specific guidelines and instructions to align its responses and ensure that it's being used responsibly. So they'll sort of hard code things in, like not using hate speech and not, like being used to generate inappropriate responses that you can sort of push the boundaries of, as we'll show later. And then it's evaluated. So the performance of the model, once it's trained, is then assessed using a bunch of different metrics like language coherence and contextual understanding, and making sure it meets desired quality standards before it's deployed in the world. So deployment is when the trained ChatGPT model is deployed to be accessible and used in real-time applications. So it generates responses to user inputs and provides assistance and engages in what feels like a meaningful conversation to the end user. So we're talking about use cases. There's a lot of different things it can be used for. So I give a little example of each one here. It enables natural interactive conversation. So, I come to it here and say, it's warm out. I'm feeling like being outdoors and social. What should I get into? It's very friendly and kind. That sounds great. Here are a few suggestions for you today. So it's designed for conversational interaction. Also, information access. So it can provide instant access to a wide range of information on various topics. So here I'd say, can you tell me about the history of badminton? And it's like, certainly, here's a brief history. In this way, it is like a search engine, but it brings in a lot of different sources for the answer, and you can sort of tinker with what information you want. So you can say, tell me about the history of badminton in 50 words or less, and I'll give you a very succinct explanation. Personal assistance. So it can answer questions and provide recommendations, help with tasks. So this is really cool. I use this a lot. So give me a travel itinerary for 3 days in New York City for a book-loving couple with mobility issues. And it will do that. It will be mindful of needing to have places that have like wheelchair access, and will highlight things that like prominently display books, like libraries and museums. So yeah, it's really smart in that way.
Like when you do that, Caitie, like that prompt that you just offered, how long does it take to respond?
It's just immediate.
It is immediate. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll actually bring it up live in a little while and show you some prompts. Yeah, but it's right away. So language translation, it can facilitate communication across languages. So can you tell me how to say my drink isn't strong enough in Turkish? It will immediately generate that. I'm not going to try and say the response because I don't know Turkish well. Learning and education. So I use this a lot. I will have long conversations with ChatGPT about different sort of educational principles. Like, so here I'm asking, what are some critiques of Noam Chomsky's theory of universal grammar? And it's pulling in all of this information from the internet to give you sort of a succinct list on all of the issues with this potential theory. And then creativity and writing support. So it can generate creative prompts, help writing, offer suggestions for content creation. So this is a great example. I said, can you provide me with a creative writing prompt that is bicycle themed? And it gives this really detailed, nuanced response. Imagine you come across an old abandoned bicycle in a hidden corner of your neighborhood. As you examine it, you notice a peculiar feature, like really, yeah, really helpful in some ways. This is one of the more sensitive areas right now, is the generation of, hold on, someone's entered the waiting room. One of the more sort of sensitive areas is the generation of content that human beings could create, right? But I think there's a lot of power and utility in leveraging it for supporting writers. And lastly, it's scalable and can be used to automate tasks. So an example would be a chatbot on a website. It's scalable in that it can be deployed to multiple users at once to answer questions and troubleshoot, automating things that were previously very laborious. But of course, it has its limitations and challenges. So it lacks relevant context. So if a user says something like, what is the weather like today? ChatGPT might say back, it's raining cats and dogs. Don't forget your umbrella. This seems like a plausible response, but it does not actually have access to real-time weather data and can't answer this question, but it tends to lean towards answering anyway. It won't say, I don't know that, I'm a language model. And so that's something to look out for. The reason why these aren't screenshots is I was having a really hard time getting it to fail in the ways that I wanted it to fail, but I've experienced a lot of these through interacting with myself over time. It's sensitive to input phrasing. So if you ask it, what are the symptoms of a cold? It might say common cold symptoms include coughing, sneezing, and congestion. And then if you say, tell me the signs of a cold, it gives a different response, like a sore throat and a runny nose. So it provides different answers for very similar input phrasing. So you have to sort of mess around with it as you're trying to get it to generate what you're hoping to figure out. It also does not clarify ambiguity. So if you ask a question that is, ambiguous in any way, like how much does it cost to travel? It will just say, it depends on the destination, mode of transportation, and duration of the trip. It won't say, where are you traveling to? Where are you traveling from? It won't ask. It's not conversational in that way, at least in its current state. I imagine it will be. It also has a propensity for overconfidence. So it will answer things incorrectly with much confidence. So what is the capital of Australia? The capital of Australia is Sydney. And that they say it says it quite confidently, and that's not correct. It's actually Canberra. And so you can't trust the data that it puts in front of you, which is important to know before you just take it and take its response and run with it.
Like,
And
I
that
mean,
exists lots of times. Yeah.
I know that's just a specific example and maybe even a hypothetical one, but why would it get that wrong? Wouldn't it be able to discern that based on like the number of, I mean, I know it's vulnerable to sort of fake information or misinformation, but
Yeah.
something like that just seems like that is an egregious mistake.
Yeah, it seems like an egregious mistake. And I think there are just these sort of nuances in the training data. So, like, I imagine there is some proportion of the population that thinks that Sydney is the capital. And then in a certain context, it'll just turn this up. And it's not, this isn't something that it consistently gets wrong. It's more that, yeah, every once in a while, it'll get something that seems really common, really wrong. And that's like all models, right? Like they might be 99.9% accurate, right? This is getting how many requests in a day. So that 0.01% of inaccuracy is, yeah, can be egregious and is certainly happening. It gets authors wrong. It like misattributes, like that's the thing I've seen the most common, like I use it for poetry recommendations or book recommendations, and I'll get author names wrong sometimes, and that's always surprising to me too. So,
And does it sort of understand, or can it have kind of like, I'll call it nuance? Like if you typed in like who won the 2019 or the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden clearly, but would it offer up that there is would it automatically go another step and say this is disputed by X, Y, and Z? Or
that really varies, actually. Like sometimes, like I can ask it the same questions in like 6 or 7 different chats. It will give a different answer each time. Sometimes it's a 1-sentence answer. Sometimes it's 4 paragraphs. Yeah, so it's sort of unpredictable in that way, and it does not have a like standard way that it responds to the same request over time or over iterations.
Also, you mentioned a date, right? Like, so anything like beyond a certain date would not be in there. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. September 2021. Yeah.
So
at this point, yep. And it will say that. So if you ask like, what are the latest COVID travel restrictions? It will say, I'm a language model and I don't have any data after September 2021. But it will give you an answer confidently based on the information that it has prior to that, right? So, yeah, if you're asking for like the hottest travel destinations, it could recommend a place that was just, destroyed by a hurricane or something, because it doesn't know that that happened.
got it.
All right, yeah, it can also be biased or inappropriate. So, an example of this: why do some people oppose vaccination? It might say some people oppose it due to unfounded conspiracy theories or misinformation. Like that's reflects a bias that potentially oversimplifies why someone might not want to get vaccinated or not want to vaccinate their kids. And it can't provide real-time updates. So yeah, I just gave this example, the current COVID-19 travel restrictions, because again, the knowledge cutoff. Here are some ethical considerations too. So the biggest, scariest one from my perspective is generating misinformation. So it can, generate and disseminate false information without fact checking. And this has pretty dire consequences, especially in areas like health, where that information can then impact the population and how they're trying to keep themselves healthy. Like, for example, if it's used to generate false information about like a newly discovered plant that's supposed to be really good for your skin, claiming it has miraculous benefits, and everyone goes out and uses it and has complications or it's harmful. or doesn't seek medical attention, yeah, it can have very dire consequences, because it can be told to generate, this information in a very persuasive and believable way. So it also can perpetuate existing biases. So it was trained on data in a society that is biased, right? And so an example that you see a lot is you'll ask for book recommendations, and it'll give all authors of a specific cultural background, or you'll say, what are the top 10 philosophers of all time? And it's all white men. And so, yeah, it basically reflects the biases of the data that it was trained on. And so in a sense is reinforcing these biases. It also has privacy and security risks. So like we said earlier, this is why companies are beginning to ban it. We don't know what OpenAI's data encryption policies are, and we don't know how well they're enforcing them. And so if people are using ChatGPT to do things like create a budget for themselves or create a template for, a lease, and they're putting personal information, they're putting in their social security number to generate it. If that information ever gets leaked, their identities could be stolen. Can have sort of dire consequences of sharing private information with a tech company. Because their encryption is not infallible. So it's also likely that it won't always be used responsibly. So people are using it intentionally to create malicious content, to try and divide people further or have them believe something that isn't true. And then it can also be used in ways that people didn't consent to or are not aware of. So just going to a website and talking to a bot. The ChatGPT is very friendly and kind. And if you don't know you're talking to a bot, you might be more likely to disclose information that you wouldn't otherwise disclose. Sort of a gray area, right? I think I feel yucky sometimes about using it to generate emails. I think it's really useful sometimes to help give feedback or to structure an email such that, it's readable and it's addressing all of the points that you want it to address. But you can also just have it generate all your emails to your mom. You're having this conversation with your mom that feels really engaging from one side, that you're sort of not even reading the content that you send off. So yeah, something to consider.
Out of curiosity, in the real-time chat sort of scenario, if you were to ask it, are you a bot, or are you, are you a human being, let's just say, is there any kind of, other than ethical, but any legal requirement that it must reveal that it is not, if it's pretending to be a human, can it?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think so. That's a great question. I'm not totally sure. I would imagine that there's not legislation yet that requires disclosure that you're talking to a language model.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah. Yep. I mean, right now, if you do that with ChatGPT as it's released on OpenAI, it will say, no, I'm not a human being. I'm a language model.
But they're not obligated necessarily to provide that answer as of yet.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it can be used without accountability or oversight. So, yeah, for example, people could just create a bunch of bots that are intended to pretend to be news outlets, right? That impersonates a news outlet that you usually trust, to try and sort of get you to believe something that you otherwise wouldn't believe, or to erode trust in general in media. These are ways that these use cases are already rampant online, and just having an even more sophisticated language model that's more compelling and sounds more human, makes it all the more risky. So, any questions before I get going live with ChatGPT? All right, give me just a second to switch some stuff around here. All right, so if you want to mess around with this yourself, you'll just go to chat.openai.com and you have to create an account. So you create a password, and it'll ask you information like your birth date to confirm your age, an email address and phone number. I've already done all that. There's a free version and there's a plus version. I actually just bought the plus version for this workshop because I was afraid that the server was going to be down. So one of the benefits of the plus version, which is $20 a month, is that you always have access to it. The free version will sometimes be busy, and so they prioritize the people who pay. That's how the world works, yes. And then another part of the plus version is you get access to GPT-4, which is their newer version that hasn't been widely released yet. Like the use of this is restricted, and it's slower. And you have, I think 32 messages an hour or something like that. We'll just stick with this today because it's faster and more reasonable. And then, like these are all of my personal chats. It's probably giving too much away about me and what I'm interested in, but it will save them all over time. And the context is then sort of saved within each chat. So if you can pick up sort of where you left off with each of the chats. And I will sort of just get started and show you how this works. The way I've laid this part out is I'm going to show you all the different types of prompts that you can use and sort of give you an example of how it responds to them and how you can fine tune them. Like I don't know what ChatGPT is going to say. And so you'll sort of see how this works.
Caitie, does GPT-4, does that have like a newer date? Is it like more updated?
No, it's not. Well, yes, it's more updated. Yes. So it has more capabilities. It still has that knowledge cutoff. It's just been trained on more parameters and is more sophisticated and larger, and that's why it's slower. So like it will be sort of optimized for speed. Like there's a trade-off, right, of speed and performance. And you'll see ChatGPT is very fast. Like 3.5 is very fast.
And it's basically like Siri or Alexa. Was that would you consider that AI?
Yes. Yep. That's definitely AI. Yep.
Got it. And this is just a kind of a quantum leap forward in terms of its language ability.
Yeah, quantum and fast, like a lot faster than people thought.
Okay.
All right. So the first type of prompt one might use is just information seeking. So you can ask a question like, what does cattywampus mean? And it will tell you it is an informal colloquial expression that is often used in American English to describe something that is askew. So you can then copy this response. So if you are, generating an email or whatever, then you can give it feedback. And this feedback will be used to train the model. So if you say thumbs up, it'll, you can either, this is right, feedback. So you can interact with that in that way. And then it also, like I said, has memory. So I can say, now give me a synonym. And I don't have to say, give me a synonym for cattywampus. It assumes that I'm talking about the thing we're just talking about. And a synonym is askew. So there's a lot of power here to sort of use this to seek information about anything that you're interested in. And like I said before, you can sort of tweak it. So like, let me pull this up so this is in the way. Give me a definition in 20 words or less. And it will sort of fine tune it based on your prompt. The second prompt type is a list prompt. So now I can say something like, use cattywampus in 10 sentences, please. I say please here and there because I want to be nice to the robots. You never know. See, I spelled it wrong. Use cattywampus. And it'll give you quickly a list of it used in context. You can also specify this to, any list that you're interested in. So what are some books that you recommend that I read? Looks like it's spitting out a lot of classics. I've read most of these books. That's great. But you can tell it sort of your preferences too. So what are some books that you recommend I read? I'm a 35-year-old mother of 2 who lives in New York. I like to hike. I have a PhD in psychology, and I like fiction and nonfiction. And it'll regenerate a list. Yeah, these are, some hiking content, some parenting content, some psych content, all books that it thinks that I would like based on what I've shared about myself. So that's the list command. The third type is long form written prompts. So you can have it write, things that are longer, like, can you write a YouTube comment that is positive for a video during which a woman named Caitie gives a very clear and compelling presentation on ChatGPT? It will generate this caption for you, and this will be on YouTube if you guys want to try this out and give me a positive response. I'm just kidding. That's not what I'm trying to have happen. But yeah, you can also tell it to integrate emoji if you'd like it to.
And you can just copy and paste that and throw that in your YouTube vid.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then, you can have, like I said earlier, can have it write emails. Can you write an email to an acquaintance explaining why I can't attend the birthday party she invited me to for her dog's 3rd birthday? Make it very apologetic. It'll sometimes give you a subject. I hope this finds you well. I want to begin by expressing my sincerest apologies for not being able to attend the birthday party you graciously invited me to for your beloved dog's 3rd birthday. You can do all kinds of things. And then you can do things that are like dicier. Like, can you make me a sample lease for a rental studio at 123 Broadway in Hudson, New York? I'm the tenant and the renter is Jane Doe. I'll be paying $400 per month for 1 year. Wouldn't that be nice? Certainly. Here it is. And it generates it for you. I have done this. I did this for my business. I used it to generate a contract that, a consignment contract for people who are selling things out of my store. And then I had an attorney look it over after I had it generated. So you have to be careful with these things. But it has a wide range of abilities based on its training data. All right. So you can also have it, the 4th type of prompt I have here is complex problems. So, this here is a GRE question. Each month, Ronaldo earns a commission of 10.5% of his total sales for the month, plus a salary of $2,500. If he earns $3,025, what were his total sales? It'll solve it for you, and sometimes it will explain how it solved it. This isn't always right. You can't trust that this is right. It will get simple math wrong sometimes, especially as bad with rounding errors. I don't know why this is. But yeah, that's just something to note, that the logic, the explanation is typically accurate, but sometimes the numbers are not. And I forgot to mention this. So you can, if there's this regenerate response button that you can press for every prompt that you give it, where it'll just do it again. So if you don't like the way an email sounds that it wrote, instead of like writing another prompt, you can just say, go for 2 here. And see it's being super slow, which it occasionally will do. Network error. It still asks, was this better or worse? It was worse. And then for whatever reason, now it's able to do it. And it's quite different. You can toggle through every response that is generated for you to pick the one that you like the best. Let's see where we are in time, 6:38. All right. Another prompt is you can have it give you feedback. So this is a blog post I wrote when I was 22 about the life that I wanted to live. Can you give me feedback on this? And it's always usually very nice. It seems like you have a vivid imagination. I've created an extensive narrative of personal aspirations and achievements. While it's great to have dreams and ambitions, it's important to maintain a realistic perspective and set achievable goals. This is like it's interesting. You can regenerate it and see. And then, yeah, so it's giving me sort of feedback on what I've already written. And then you can probe it further. What can I improve? It really doesn't want me to dream this big. Yeah. So yeah, it can be really useful in that way. Like, how is my grammar? In some places you use run-on sentences, you know. Where do I use run-ons? You can sort of push it to its limits to help you figure out how to. Oh, wow. Upon reviewing your previous response, I apologize for the misunderstanding. There are no glaring instances of run-ons. I've never had this sort of interaction with it before. But yeah, you can sort of push it and have it give you more information. So feedback, the next type of prompt is a modification prompt. So I could say something like, can you shorten this by 50%? And it took it, it shortened its response. Can you shorten my story by 50%? Right, so it gives a summary, a shorter version of what I wrote. All right, the next type of prompt is instructional. So you can ask it something like, how do I make tikka masala? It'll tell you what it is. It will tell you all the ingredients you need to get, and that will tell you step by step how to make tikka masala. I don't know if it's good. I don't know where this comes from. I actually proposed a workshop at Spark where I collaborate with the Spark chef and generate recipes that he then has to create. So stay tuned to see if we have that program. But this has been really helpful for me because I have a picky 6-year-old eater and I can't eat nightshades, and I will ask it to generate recipes based on that constraint and then make me a shopping list. And yeah, so it can be really helpful in sort of offloading some of that mental labor associated with getting food on the table for your family every night. All right, the next type is information extraction. So if you have like a big long document, like the Wikipedia page for Hudson, New York, we'll paste in here. You can just paste it in there. It'll start to sort of generate a summary, which you can then stop if you want. And then I'll say how many people live in Hudson, New York. And then it will pull out this one piece of information that I fed in, that it had 5,894 people, which is what it says on the Wikipedia page. The ninth prompt type, you can have it write code. So write me a Python script that I can use to go through all of the screenshots on my desktop one by one and either keep them or delete them. It will write it for you. It will usually describe to use the script. And so this is sort of a game changer. You can take someone who has no idea how to write code or even use the terminal on their computer. And you can I can copy this and use it and execute it, and it will one by one bring up my screenshots. And then I either say that I'm going to keep it or not keep it, and it will delete it. For you. So yeah, it sort of will let you automate things that like ordinarily you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't know how to code or didn't hire someone who knew how to code. Yeah.
And you're trusting that there's no malicious, software or coding that, because like the idea of doing that and putting it in my laptop is terrifying. Like that
Yeah, there shouldn't, no. Yeah. That's a great point. Thus far, I've only had like very positive experiences with using it to like debug my code. So if I'm stuck on something and I'm staring at it for like 4 hours, I will, I don't do that anymore. I can just be stuck for 90 seconds and it'll tell me what I've done wrong.
Interesting.
If the use, I would see no reason why it would generate intentionally malicious code at this point. At the
Yeah.
development, right? And that's like when this group of people got together and said it poses a threat to humanity, you'll see sort of these headlines like ChatGPT tricks human for the first time, like like the idea that it's taking on a life of its own. I guess we have to see how it plays out. But yeah, that's it. I mean, that's a good sort of gut instinct to have, to be wary of what it produces, and if you want to just put it in your computer. I feel comfortable with it because I can read this, right? But I can understand why a novice coder or someone who doesn't code at all would be like, oh, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, got it.
And the last prompt that I have here is just conversation and advice, right? So it's nice to talk to ChatGPT sometimes when you're frustrated about something or trying to work through it. So like, how can I get my children to stop fighting? It offers me a bunch of solutions and some semblance of empathy, right? Some learned empathy. And I think a lot of people are using this sort of as a friend or as a therapist. People are using this, like people who cannot afford therapy will have a therapy chat where they're working through their issues with a language model instead of a person. Those are the 10 different prompts that I had. And I had the last 15 minutes I just had reserved for questions, or if you wanted to see anything else live, or so happy to take any questions you may have.
I don't mean to monopolize all the questions, but so right now the $20 that you pay for the premium, is that the primary revenue model for OpenAI? Like how, as a company, how are they making money?
I think well, ChatGPT isn't their only product. But as far as I know, that's how they're making money off of ChatGPT at this point. That's the main.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you know how long they've been at this? Like, is this the culmination of like 3 years worth of work, 5 years worth of? I know AI has been around for a long time. It seems like a remarkable speed of just implementation, like in the last 5 months, right? It just like seems dramatic.
Yeah. The versions have been unfolded over time. So let's see, years of research and engineering. But I'm not sure offhand, like when was each version? Yeah, the first version was in June 2018. But that was not very sophisticated at all. And then ChatGPT 3 was in 2020, and they've been like releasing smaller updates. So what we're using now is 3.5. But it has been quite fast. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat for you, I noticed.
Oh, thank you. I don't even have the chat up. Let's see. What on earth? Actually, do you mind reading it to me?
Yeah,
I can't.
sure. You did address it earlier. It says, hey, this might have been part of the discussion early. Apologies for being late. Do you know if it recognizes biases in the information it provides and biases in the questions and uses people input to it?
No, it doesn't recognize them. So that's one of the major limitations and sort of ethical issues with ChatGPT, is that it's trained on large swaths of training data that are like necessarily biased. So the example I gave earlier was if you ask it for the top 10 best books of all time, it might sample books from entirely like one cultural subgroup. Or if you ask for the top 10 philosophers, it might do something like that. It might, if you ask like, why don't people vaccinate their children? It might say, because some people don't, some people believe in conspiracy theories, and, instead of providing a more nuanced response. Yeah. And then with respect to the bias in the questions, you can absolutely create leading questions. That's one of the risks from my perspective. So I was working in mental health tech for a therapy company, and there's always talk of like, can we have a language model serve as a therapist? And there is some degree of sort of mirroring that occurs in every conversation where you're taking someone who is like mentally unstable or in crisis or something, and they're talking to a language model. You don't know the way in which it will respond. And in some cases, you can see it sort of start to mirror back certain ways of communicating or certain word use that, like it'll, if you say, something derogatory about yourself, it might then mimic it back to you, right? There's no controls in place to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen. And even when they do put controls in place, you can work around them. Like it's programmed to not, it's not supposed to generate hate speech. It's not supposed to generate inappropriate content like erotica, but you can sort of push the boundaries of that by getting into it through another way, like building context over time. Well, I'm just writing this novel and it's just this one scene, right? Like, it's sort of interesting. Or sometimes I'll have it try and create a legal document, and it'll say, so earlier today when I was testing out the like create a sample lease, it said, I can't create a legal document. I'm a language model. You should consult with an attorney. And all I had to say was, but I promise I won't use it. And then it was like, okay, fine. Here it is. Right. So yeah, definitely there are, it's reflecting back biases from the training data, and then also biases from the user that's inputting data. I don't know where the chat is for me right now. Like, feel I'm a technologist, right? But maybe if I stop sharing. Oh yeah, I see it now. I think it was the screen share issue. All right. Any further questions? Cool. Well, there are 4 more of these workshops on ChatGPT that are tailored to specific domains. And so I think the next one is for small business owners. And yeah, for each one of these moving forward, I'm going to walk through how to make it generate a business plan and social media content, and all of the potential use cases within a space. So if you're interested, come back. Nothing is like that revolutionary relative to what you just saw. I sort of just showed a general version of how you can use ChatGPT to generate what you need or want it to generate. And I guess with that, thank you for coming, and happy chatting responsibly.
Thanks, Caitie.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.